The gaming industry, along with the music and film industry, are a weird set of industries where artists, technologic, and business people meet and mix in ways that no other industry comes close to. Like the manufacturing world or any other forms of production, the gaming industry exists to make money. The difference is that this money is generated almost exclusively through selling artistic or creative outputs. Getting value out of artistic creativity is not like getting value out of toilet paper or cars. It's not predictable or guaranteed that your creative product will make money. When they find something that works and seems to do so predictably, oh god, you will see a lot more of it. That's why you see so many sequels and reboots. Known franchises and formulas that have done well in the past are a much better investment of your money than a completely untried and untested film script. Games are no different in this regard. If you start up a new franchise and it's a mega hit, the owners of that IP will keep stamping out more and more of that game until the particular cash cow doesn't have a drop left in it. It's pretty rare for people to say no to a license to print money, and it's usually a case of the creative force also having control of the business side. A good example of this is Back to the Future 4. Robert Zemeckis has outright killed that idea. Sure, good or bad, that movie would have made him a much richer man, but he just isn't interested. The trilogy ain't broke, so why try to fix it? I wish Microsoft had that mindset with some of their franchises like Halo. In gaming, we could maybe point to Dark Souls 3, which is perhaps the last game in that franchise. It's not the last game to use that formula per se, but in terms of it being a real canon Dark Souls game, it seems like From Software are choosing to move on after their first really huge hit. I don't want to create this idea that risk aversion is somehow a bad thing by itself. Likewise, obviously, publishers, developers, studios, and other companies that trade in creative works need to turn a profit and stay in business. Creativity is all about trying new things and remaking old things into new ways, whereas risk aversion is mostly about sticking with things that have worked in the past rather than risking something new that might not work out. There's no reason why these two forces can't be in balance with each other, and more often than not, that's the case. The suits want to do a new Halo game or Final Fantasy, and that means sticking to certain general parts of the formula, but within that framework, creativity can blossom and new ideas can be implemented. Over the course of a long series of games, these changes can add up to something completely fresh. Just compare the first Final Fantasy to one of the modern games. The basic DNA is still there, but the games are otherwise completely different. Sometimes, however, one or the other factions wins out, and that delicate balance between creative risk and business caution gets thrown out of whack. We have a few examples of this sort of uneven relationship in the game development industry. Call of Duty is probably a good example of this, where the main creative force that made each iteration pop and sizzle were squeezed out by bean counters who thought that change would be a bad thing for their profit margins. On the flip side, you get guys who are given way too much creative freedom like John Romero or Peter Molyneux, who end up making expensive flops where you wish someone with a little more business sense would have stepped in. The creative who's given too much power is pretty much a rare story though. What's much more common is the mega publisher that begins to interfere with a studio's creative vision. When they decide to force a studio to tack on a pointless extra game mode such as the Deus Ex Mankind Divided's Breach mode, something that the developers have admitted was forced by Square Enix, and people like Jim Sterling have rightly pointed out, only exists to nickel and dime more money out of us. It's also why I can't always be as hard on Peter Molyneux, who to his credit told EA many times that the Bullfrog games were not ready to sell, and yet EA did it anyways. There are reams and reams of examples where executives come in and suddenly decide they're the script writers, art directors, and other specialized creative people. They think for some reason that the people that they specifically hired because they thought they were the best person for the job got it wrong, and that they themselves have the inside track. The question is, why does this happen? I have a couple thoughts on what may be going on, so let me lay them out for you. The first reason I think executive meddling tends to happen is that the type of person ruthless enough to reach these high managerial positions also tends to have a personality type that aligns with psychopathy. That's categorized by narcissism, ego, and with a lack of empathy or conscience. In their book Snakes in Suits, When Psychopaths Go to Work, Paul Babbitt and Robert Hare first brought up the idea that these personality traits of psychopaths make them good at reaching the top of corporations. Corporations like large game publishers that own a lot of studios. The next reason why this may be happening is because creative work can look very easy from the outside. We can only see the positive end results of the creative process, and we don't see all the dead ends and the ideas that don't make it. Trust me, Every creative person knows most of what they do is junk, and it takes true grit to work at something until it becomes good. Who hasn't looked at someone doing something with ease and thought, oh, I could do that? It's not an uncommon mistake people make, and if you happen to be very good at something else, like management, you may think that translates to being good at other stuff too. In fact, the smarter and more capable you are, the more likely you are to make certain kinds of mistakes because you overestimate your own competence. The last reason I think this happens is simple greed and too much trust in historical data. We tend to make fundamental mistakes of thinking that the past will predict the future. Past trends are a good guide, but they aren't a perfect prophecy. Executives may overreact to anything they think threatens the profit margin, especially something that seems to go against what they think is a solid formula from the past. The funny thing about the last point is that for some reason, the one thing that many executives at large publishers can't seem to do is learn from their past mistakes. They repeat their meddling in the same ways over and over again, and the outcomes change little. In the end, self-sabotage is a very human trait, and believe it or not, these executives are just human beings. The difference is that their screw-ups get painted on a global canvas so that people like me and you can point it out to them. The most recent example of this is, of course, the release of Titanfall 2 in a tight release schedule that EA thought would be a good idea because, and I quote, it has a different experience from Battlefield, and they wanted to double down on the market share of first-person shooters against Infinite Warfare. And as you know, Titanfall 2 is suffering heavily because of this, even though arguably it's probably one of the best shooters of the year. And that's why on Twitter I said I would become Titanfall 2's advocate. And if there's only one call to action I can give you at the end of this video, it's to support Titanfall 2. There are a lot of sales going on, and you can probably pick up Titanfall 2 for $35 or less. If you have the money, please buy this game, support it, because not only is it a really great game, doing something good with its free DLC, something that the other shooters that came out around the same time, Battlefield 1 and Infinite Warfare, have failed to do. So if you plan on buying any game this holiday season or gifting a game to someone this holiday season, why not support a good game?